Hi, I'm Morgan Beasley. I work at Electronic Caregiver and I'm employed here as a UX designer. So I grew up in Cloudcroft, New Mexico, which is like a rural mountain community. So I think it was a pretty different upbringing than what a lot of people get to experience. Very close-knit community, kind of goes with the rural part of it. And just with being there, like from kindergarten to senior year, there were people that I knew that entire time that went to school with me, including some people I still talk to and am close with. So that's really cool. Also, a lot of animals up there, a lot of really neat outside experiences that I don't think I would have gotten if I'd grown up in like a city or something like that. Kind of going on with like the animals and like the outdoor part of that, had a lot of interesting experiences hiking just growing up, like mostly with my family and sometimes with friends. One time we had some encounters with bears back on hiking too, so that was definitely very unique. We had one of our dogs, our family dogs, get chased by a bear once. Thankfully, they came back. The bear was not chasing them at that point, which was also good. And everybody went home in one piece. So it was a good story, but definitely very scary when it was actually happening. But yeah, that definitely was because of where I grew up. I think a lot of them taught more like on the soft skills side of things, like where I really got to like have that understanding of like on a basic level, like English is something I use on a day-to-day level, like with typing, with communicating with people. That's been a big one. I would say a lot of the more extracurricular classes I took also played a big part in learning skills. Like with band, we were taught about punctuality and just working together as a team was a big one, like within your section, like being able to communicate, being able to work together, both in terms of like music or if it was marching band, being able to step and be moving across the field pretty much as one unit. So I learned a lot from there. Also, mock trial was another class that I took that was really formative. I got to learn a lot about dissecting information to get a better understanding of the overall picture. And that's something that's been relevant, like pretty much from that point on, and that was something that I got a little bit of before that, like with just basic problem solving and things like that. But that really augmented it and got me more interested in thinking through the processes of stuff and being able to pick apart information to just get more from it than what might have initially been presented. So for my job, I didn't need any type of licenseship or certification for that. I think the minimum for it was a bachelor's degree, which is the minimum for a lot of jobs. But I did have a master's degree whenever I came into the job. So my bachelor's, I had a major in psychology with minors in forensic psychology and sexual and gender studies, or sexuality and gender studies. And then for the master's, I have an experimental psychology degree. I think the majority of my work is prototyping, which is just kind of building out the framework or the visual side of what the developers will actually be building with the code and linking everything on the back end side of things, like we're in the part that we don't actually get to see. So I do a lot of prototyping with that, where I'll just be building or designing features, maybe working through the flow of how like a certain task needs to go. That's a lot of what I do at work. I also coordinate some among other teams with trying to figure out like what needs to get done sooner, or rather than later, like what's the priority basically, and going through a lot of the information we get to figure out what form it will actually take. We get a lot of information about whatever features we're building, and only some of it is actually relevant to what we do. It's all relevant, but in terms of the visual side of things, not everything will need to come across in that way. So part of my job is also just going through that and figuring out what we actually need to worry about, what we don't need to worry about, and making sure that if it's something we don't need to worry about, make sure somebody else is taking care of that. My typical day is a lot of time spent on the computer. I typically start the mornings off just kind of getting the lay of the land and understanding like what I need to get done that day or what I hope to get done that day. We have a couple meetings, like one with my team, sometimes one with some of the members of the other teams just to get on the same page, but that just depends on the day. I usually do some prototyping specifically related to my work. So depending on what we're focusing on at that point, it could be something for accounting. It could be maybe an external tool that somebody like from a customer side of things might be looking at one day. There's a lot of that. There's also a good amount of organization mixed in because I work with a team. We all have to kind of figure out who's working on what and delegate those responsibilities out. So I'll do a little bit of that too and just kind of figure out like what do we need to do to keep things moving forward. And that's kind of how I wrap up with my day is figuring out like, okay, what did we actually accomplish today? What do we need to do the next day? Like, what do we need to do to get done for the rest of the week? And just kind of summarize it like that. I think my favorite part would definitely be the people I work with, which is a bit cliched, but very true because they make my job easier on a day-to-day basis. I work with a great team who's very skilled and very eager to learn, and that makes a huge difference whenever we're going through and actually working on stuff. Like having people with that type of attitude, it makes a world of difference. So kind of applying that to what we do a lot of collaboration between all of the different projects we work on. It's almost never one person just working on a single thing. It might start out that way, but they'll be getting feedback from the other people on the team and implementing that. And so it ends up being, kind of a vision of all of us on that team working on it. So that's what I enjoy the most is just getting to collaborate and work with them and kind of hear the different perspectives they might bring to a problem that we're having. I don't really have a set 5-year plan, and that's mostly just because there's so many things that I get excited about that I don't want to limit myself in terms of where exactly I see myself in 5 years. And I think if I had limited myself, I probably wouldn't be working in this position right now, which is, a good thing that I'm working here right now. I think if I had to kind of specify it though and kind of put an ideal 5-year, like what that would look like, it would probably be taking a lot of the processes and the overall kind of understandings I've built from here and maybe specifying it down to some of the more specific focuses I had in grad school, which were related to healthcare, which is kind of hitting at what I do right now, but I think I would enjoy being able to go more into like the research side of things with that, or just be a little bit more hands-on in terms of the content. Right now, like the content kind of comes to me in whatever form, like we could be working on a tool for accounting and I don't have a background in accounting. That's not going to stop me from getting that tool done, but it's also like not the focus of what I went to school for. And so I think if I could just get into something research related with that type of processes and what I've learned here kind of integrated all together, that would probably be my goal. Well, I can say like I definitely have like stuff I currently do to think about like where I want to go after here. Like a lot of it for me, since I do have such vast interests, as I was kind of listing off like what my interests were with my degrees. I mean, there was psychology as like kind of the core root through all of it, but there was also some pieces related to forensics, also related to gender and sexuality. So I pretty much try and research anything related to my interests as much as I can, and see like what of all the things I like, what is going to map onto the life I want to create for myself the best. And so I look at salaries, I look at like what actually happens on a day-to-day basis in terms of like would I actually enjoy doing that? Because if I'm going to be spending a lot of my life working, I want to actually enjoy what I'm doing. I think that's probably the biggest piece for me. So research is pretty much the answer to that. Just figuring out like what positions exist, what job fields like would really like adhere to what I want, and then based on that, I'm start building on that information and figure out like where do I want to be in 5 years based on that. I think a big one that I kind of touched on was problem solving. I think that's probably like one of the most beneficial soft skills somebody can have because it's applicable to so many different fields and areas. Like pretty much any job you get into, problem solving will be a part of it in some format. So if you can at least understand like the basis of it, of how to dissect the information, how to view it in a different light, how to really understand what the core issue of something is, like that's beneficial all around, no matter what you go into.